Hello everyone, today we'll do something highly unusual because after 2400 videos it's not like I've ever even began to start talking history, but I can afford at least some sort of moral ground to say, well, one day I can take a day off, so to say, to do something outrageous, by the way, and extremely controversial, that is to say, essentially offering a very raw, critical take of mine on many, actually here, possibly even 100, maybe several tens of YouTube history channels that thus will mostly be described in not because of what my intentions, but just out of what it turns out to be in terms of especially what I think to be historical usefulness in not entirely flattery terms. Jokes aside, of course, I will as you'll see, probably offer like a pretty balanced judgment of the world. There are many reasons why I would do this, but I guess that for YouTube standards, videos like this are sort of more understandable than paradoxically my deep dives for hours in a row about, in every provincial military context of the Middle Ages. Except it's something very risky because, say, I will probably form like now so many enemies, except nobody will probably watch this video anyway, nor there are going to be tags, chapters, etc. So likely, again, very few of the actual creators will get to know what I discovered, by the way, in a completely accidental fashion. I think like a couple of years ago, I was ranked in one YouTube video pretty low. I don't know. I didn't even watch it. I just was watching like the below. I don't even know how to say that. Like, just the one you can skip from, not even clicking on the video, just in the miniature, the point where I arrived with von Clausewitz's portrait there. And jokes aside, I think it can be interesting because, as you understand, we talk often on the channel about how pop cultural history, how people watch YouTube, what's the general mass phenomenon behind it, as it changes over the years. Like when I started which Schwerpunkt things were relatively easier than are today. I mean, I'm a bigger channel than then, of course, and so things are slightly easier for me specifically. But I realized that, for example, with AI, with lots of it, there are lots of people, first of all, complaining about YouTube in general, right? And there is an idiosyncrasy towards especially like AI voices. Some people ask me, well, why don't you record with an AI voices? But these are probably modern language that are just politely telling me they don't like my accent. It's totally understandable and whatever. But going back to the topic, I think this is interesting because I can speak better my mind out also for all those people who want to know my ideology and, create all complicated theories out there without even watching my actual history content, which would actually be self-explanatory. And I think that's a huge problem that basically summarizes the average attitude of people today. They want a quick, cheap, superficial labeling, properly stigmatizing certainties because they are basically freaking out to confront with reality. And of course the fact that if you want to learn anything for real, you have actually to work pretty hard on it. I will not resume my credentials here, YouTube-wise, not my actual professional ones, nor I will reiterate this beforehand, because likely today we'll get through that. So basically, I have a massive list, to make the long story short, of YouTube history-themed videos. I'm not actually going to tell you on which criterion they have been selected, who has given them to me, or how the whole process behind stood. These are, however, in the best explanation, basically some of the most consistently active and almost historical, some are very famous, admittedly, history channels that would also deserve much better considerations. Like if we're going to talk about, Schola Gladiatoria or Kings and Generals, sometimes we made commentaries on them, but they're big channels, and so today we'll just deal with them maybe slightly longer than the others, but just for a few minutes at most. So I will not render justice to the actual pros and cons of all the ones we're going to. I'm not even going to rank them. I'm not going to give a number or whatever. I don't believe in that stuff. I will just basically, however, give you like what, in my opinion, like could be the deal, like what kind of people tend to watch this stuff, why, what's the seduction behind it, and what kind of outcome this brings to, like what kind of historical message passes through these type of videos. There are and channels that are very popular in many cases, and so literally inform people's minds. I mean, Schwerpunkt, for example, is a very modest channel, but it had millions of views, not even impressions. So to say that surely they did, if you look at the quantity, strictly speaking, they heavily inform the masses. I have all an idea of how literally, especially people in their 20s, their 30s, are largely a sort of YouTube generation as far as history is concerned. Like they basically think of history more like in terms of memes and whatever they have grasped from the internet at large, but especially on YouTube, than anything parenting, schooling, and broader, culturally speaking, which is actually an issue, right? Of course, on Schwerpunkt, I make content that is supposed to sort of counter the main tide of, in fact, general superficiality. So sometimes these channels literally tell you these are simplified history channels. What is that even supposed to mean? It's quite disturbing if you stop thinking about it, because it would sound innocent. It's just like saying, you don't have to take us as seriously. But if you get millions of views, and you start actually, especially reading the comments below, like you realize that there is essentially a subcultural humus of misconceptions that are developing, regardless sometimes even of the fundamentally good content in strictly sort of basic informational terms, but that mostly, this is the main criticism, does not stimulate any further, any actual, because it's not like people watch these videos and they actually develop some kind of historical criticism or understanding or capacity. This is more just like a background, as a sort of forum where they see the topic and they comment the first thing that passes through their mind for whichever psychological reasons they feel they need to. It's not like they're even focusing on what they're saying. I know better, especially making particularly long content and having people sometimes following me from years, commenting in ways that really make me wonder whether they were actually into the actual content, or whether, as it often happens also with some of these personalities, like more like a familiar figure. Like they like maybe that there is the person they are talking, they want to find out more about the creators as people, their private life, as it happened also to me, like what's the ideology behind this, and so it's a very interesting psychological as historical experience, even to be from the other side. But let's pass to this butchery, because it's going to be a butchery, and I don't have any problem saying that. So first of all, yes, I'm going to be harsh, but I'm trying not to simply trash this kind of content. Just it's a lot of YouTube channels, let's say, that I'm just sort of helping them gain notoriety in exchange for some kind of criticism on that. First of all, there are these that I see that are always in streaming for some reason, and I don't understand nor how or why. One is Odyssey Ancient History Documentaries, possibly some of these, because I don't really watch them. I don't really watch any of these channels. There are some that I know better, some that I know worse, because sometimes I watch them, or I watched them, I don't know, many years ago consistently, but it's basically one or two just. And so I do not know well their content. So this may be a problem, because at the end of the day, again, I don't have, at least if I don't know something, I don't have reason to doubt that the information is good, right? Especially if they are popular channels, and if I see that there is some, especially some, good editing behind them, there is a team, they're part of some bigger project, and so on. What I will limit myself to is my personal impression as a YouTuber myself, having my sort of historical background, my YouTube background in fact history content, and essentially giving you my feed based on what's the actual consequence like of watching this stuff, like what would a content of this type transmit mostly to the audience, mostly in forms of sort of misconceptions. More than else, sometimes it's my own distaste for some style or another, but I think it's important in the way it's philosophically tied to history. So Odyssey ancient history documentaries, I will skip the how many, say, whether it's big or small, they're all fairly popular, bigger channels of mine, by the way, with not the amount of videos, etc. This one is part, I think, of those typically, there is a specific group that makes specifically Anglo, and very, not even Anglo-American, but specifically British, recurrent sort of British favorite themes, topics, right? They work here with a specific archaeologist who also looks good because she's objectively charming, and so they put her on all thumbnail, etc. And this is this kind of weird, a bit materialistic, archaeology based, typically, British BBC documentary, sort of polished, but also basically self-contained content, like the ancient mystery of the headless Roman slave skeletons. Oh my god, the pagan hell of ancient Ireland, etc. And it's mostly basically about this archaeological cut that I don't like very much. It stops basically just to the British. Here it's just like, the craziest ancient treasures in digging for Britain, uncovering the secrets of the 45-year-old Avebury Stone circle. And they're also pretty long documentaries. I'm not even claiming that there is something wrong or, low quality about the information. But give me a break in terms of, the forgotten ancient warriors that defended Hadrian's Wall, and you have the AI, because this is the real plague of it all. Image of a stereotype Roman legionary. It is always going towards this almost creepy, morbid thing with skeletons, heads. This is really not a kind of history that I see the purpose of. I mean, again, I'm sure the information is interesting. I'm sure the people behind it are entertained, are able to show you how they dig the whole thing. But also what I think about archaeology, it's very limited. Like, why wouldn't you actually show the beliefs, the very strong evidence, I don't know, Anglo-Saxon political history, as opposed to what you dug as in the dirt as an object, right? Or leaving those poor corpses alone. We know so much about the whole history, like the politics, the culture, the spirituality. Why don't you actually talk about that? It would be much more interesting. It would simply put people on a completely different mood, and this is the kind of content you'd never find on Schwerpunkt. Then we have Skullagram. Skullagram is a very famous channel that I never really follow for many reasons. The guy is really fine. I'm not really tuned with his style, whatever. Here I see in live there is also a skull in the background of the actual video, not the logo of Skullagram. Of course, that refers to the skull, but it's more very often revolving around a bit this weapons sort of fantasy paradoxes, bit creepy horror stuff. It's mostly like I don't even know how to define this. I don't know, punk fantasy history. I don't even know what's the proper term. I guess the guy is a chemist, by the way, so he's probably expert about the stuff. And again, as far as that is concerned, okay, but sometimes I've heard also things like would how an elf would actually use this weapon in this particular type of fantasy or whatever. Those are also the things that I will never understand. Like, if you're really, I know there are people who lean mostly towards the fantasy side of the story. To me, it's a sort of an alienation from reality. So again, the channel is quite famous, prosperous. Again, I have no beef with the guy. It's fine to me. He does his job well. He's very successful at what he does, but again, like, still things like Viking versus Knight, or this, things like how to practice historical martial arts on your own. I mean, I'm sure that there is an important audience to that, but I still wonder, like, why would anyone who's interested in history specifically watch this stuff as opposed to know more or less, of course, I'm very self-referential, but I think to a bigger scale of actual historical concreteness, like how would actually armies fight tactically, units, commanders, from actual history, from actual evidence. I never see this. All the thumbnails I see here is swords, hilts, sometimes like superheroes, fantasy stuff. Again, why? I think that there is a very interesting, aside from scalegram here, but there's a very interesting psychological dimension to analyze regarding why people are connected mostly to this sort of almost distraction from the actual concreteness of politics or society, because we have an enormity of information regarding that, and people narrow the stuff down to things like this, to Game of Thrones, to weird knives. I'm just simply reading weapons for vampires. Well, again, I get that some people are fixated with certain stuff, but how and why would a thing like this be so worth of consideration? It's difficult for me to understand, really, or at least it's not Scalagram's fault at all. He does well what he does, and he should keep doing so. But how do people get into this? I personally, as a person, I'm speaking from a subjectively individual point of view, I will never probably even want to know. Then, if I understand here, some of the stuff is may also connected. For example, here there is timeline world history documentaries. This seems a bit more like the usual. This is also a bit the mostly instead not British but mostly Anglo-American fixation topics, like mostly here made actual videos topics that I also made recently, but it's mostly like Hitler and Hitler, then Hitler and Hitler and Hitler, and then, some other World War II thing, and then here a girl making the Nazi salute, and then here we have something also from the former attractive archaeologist that, so I understand, works for both things. They're probably a branch of that. So again, not my cup of tea. I mean, again, the ladies welcome as a figure there and their competence, whatever. Just not the specific topic choice that I see on this channel. Then Made in History. These are again all pretty prominent history channels. New World Order, Communism, American Golden Age, the Cold War, World War One. New imperialism, birth of the Americas. So you understand where this goes, like mostly like 18th, 19th, 20th century history. And so all topics that are a bit, and these are long documentaries, I don't doubt. They also probably pack stuff together, because I see here a 7 hours long video. Now there is this mania, like if you have made enough videos, I've never done, fortunately, such a thing that it's completely useless, also in my opinion. Like, you make, 20 videos about a certain era, you cram everything together, and you give people this random stuff just for saying, look, this how long this video is about all this stuff crammed together. And again, it's also all very unspecific. I'd say they're fairly specific topics, but they're also like how comprehensive they are. This is the main problem, I would say, when these channels are based mostly on some kind of information, yes, but also some sort of entertainment. Like, for example, the Byzantine Empire, a complete overview, 45 minutes. In 45 minutes you can talk about the Byzantine Empire, but how much of a complete overview can it be, and what does it actually mean? Why did the 300,000 people who watched that would actually, with all the much more in-depth Byzantine stuff on the internet, simply watch this? It's like we don't know well enough what this is. Like medieval Europe, a complete overview, 1 hour and 45 minutes, 1 million and 1.4 million views. What will have there been within it that is so like the holy grail, like molten gold of information for attracting? Even if the video may be as long, that is just very compressed, superficial information. How many other videos on YouTube there are? Really thousands and thousands, right? You really want to make me believe that random pictures and video footage, like in a sort of average documentary style, can't simply make that together with an explanation? I highly doubt that. Then chronicle, medieval history documentaries. This, I think, are the same pack as before. This is terrible because it's very much like the thumbnails are all made with AI, and it's always like the self-referential, selectively, narrowly British choices of the war, right? The most important invention of the Middle Ages, right? The print machine, and the medieval battles that defined Middle Ages Britain. These are also pretty long videos, telling the truth. At least they are, especially the latter 2 hours and a half crammed together. I see there are, there is the interview to the expert with historian with the books behind. So you already know it's this, again, normal sort of British TV style kind of stuff. Anglo-Saxon village life, and you have these guys with AI-generated face that looks, oh my God. Or like ultra models, like the Vikings saved medieval Ireland from the brink of collapse. Question mark, dun dun dun. The bizarre medieval executions at the Tower of London. Can we stop with this stuff? I mean, seriously, like, which people, in fact, this, I must say, gets less views than other channels would say. I mean, probably just also, however, for the wrong reason, because it's medieval. But, I mean, how many times do we have to hear these titles that are also just like a bit of a joke? Like, they're sort of dumb questions made probably on purpose, either for clickbait or whatever. But can we get past to, why don't you, British history is so beautiful, all right? Why do you have to dumb it down in this way? Why? You have full of details. You have, again, full of an dimensional history of actual big battles next to the Hastings. There's never Bouvines, by the way. Who knows why? Agincourt and Crécy, and then, the Battle of Towton, and etc. But, isn't there any other sort of important big deal of medieval English battle that can be more interesting than any you can find in any cheap disclosure book, and some deeper critical thinking? Because, you see, you're interviewing experts, so you're supposed to have an access to much more interestingly in-depth stuff. And why doesn't more in-depth stuff attract the audience? You say, but people want the simpler history. Why? Because they already know it. They want to hear it again. Like, if you want to spectacularize or to still present in more accessible formats, why does it have always to be this kind of cheap, generic, and ultimately dumb kind of historical choosing? I really don't understand it. Then there is See You in History / Mythology. This one is, I don't like it very much for the simple reason that he makes lots of, he made more videos than I did, and literally in terms, like 3 or 4 videos in a day that last 2 minutes sometimes, or 5 minutes, and it's things like the domestic elves, the Shogun against Nobunaga, Triari, the elite of the legions. What can you learn in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes? And it's just all AI generated images, or maybe not, some are drawn, but some are AI as well. And it's just like this pseudo cool video effect, and I presume literally zero information, because whatever this is, in 2 minutes, Zeus' forgotten wife, they're like in 3 minutes. What's the point of that? Right? What kind of information, what kind of qualitative type of properly of insight can you offer into this? And with random video footage, half AI or whatever, I will never really know. There are even people watching this stuff, which is, in my opinion, incredibly incredible to begin with. This is also the one with the previous archaeologist, Unearthed History, archaeology documentaries. And so this is always, you expect, it's all about Britain. It's always Britain, right? Or things connected with some, British colonial taste, like there's something about Egypt. But it's always the Spanish Armada, Battle of Hastings, and Waterloo, how this battle could have ended, like, stuff like that. But why did the Romans build an isolated church at Stoke Mandeville? I mean, I'm sure that if you want even to get to know some places in Britain, it's very useful and whatever, but at the same time, what's the appeal of seeing maybe, again, the aforementioned archaeologist, or maybe this other guy is surely another archaeologist, an elderly guy that tells you, oh, look, we have come here, look at this place. And there is, what kind of that level of documentary approach is. Maybe the information is also good and in depth to an extent, but it's just like these guys talking with one another, walking around. It's unspecifically. It's just like watch what, I don't know, your brother-in-law did on vacations. Like, if he comes back, showing to the family. Like, who cares about this stuff? It's really incredible. And you could simply, if you really want to publicize so many different places in Britain, for example, you could do much better in terms of sheer, and it's just, maybe just a piece of wall, right? That's not even like a major landmark, like a castle. Also, the many bigger things you can find in Britain. So I really don't understand this approach either. It feels like they're selling sort of very I will skip some political channel that has fallen into it. Again, I'm not going to tell you which criterion I use this. Then there is Mega Projects. This is a very big channel with a guy who basically talks mostly contemporary warfare, and that with a specific technological bias, like how things are built, how cost benefits, worth are they, big things, to the mania of giantism, etc. He mostly, I think I learned of him for the first time from the Metatron when he came up with this video, like We're the Roman Psychopaths or something like that. Personally, I never watched his content. It's probably good, but I think it's maybe, again, if you're interested in this kind of technical stuff, if you have a mechanical mindset, it's probably a very good channel for you. But in the sense, I don't see probably also by the intention of the author, like any specifically deeper historical or because there is a lot of military here, but there is no specific art of war contextualization. It's mostly data, numbers, whatever, etc. And so if you're looking also for a broader history of warfare video, I don't think it's really what you would expect. And I say this because, again, apparently the guy makes some excursus more in that field, and he received sometimes backlash. And again, he makes things big style. They're big videos. They make hundreds of thousands of views each. I'm sure he deserves that. I just think, like, from my perspective, from where I come from my topics and how it was associated in this list, like more eccentric to our selection. Then House of History. This one focuses mostly on military history, and it is, those channels that focus very much on maps, animated maps, 3D kind of stuff, and or those boxes that fight against one another with the little cards with the face of the general. And it talks mostly, here I see an enormous amount of, it's mostly naval history and World War II. Right, so it's a lot of this. The videos are fairly, mostly 20 minutes long, etc. You see here 7 hours long of all the stuff he made about Frederick the Great. Fine, so I'm sure that if you want to run that kind of marathon, you want to see these battles and how they visually. I don't know how much. Probably they're very much simplified, because we know better through Schwerpunkt when we reconstruct battles how complicated it is, but also, aside from the work that I can make behind the scenes to make it more, say, smoother, more flowing, etc., it's still very complex to tell the battle for the sake of making you understand how hardly fought and, in this sense, important and meaningful they were. If I have a battle explanation that lasts 16 minutes, I cannot convey that, right? I can make, yes, the animation that surely requires some work, etc. But how is that fully picturing all the massive technical, tactical, and strategical issues of important battles like this, right? The complexity, even just of 18th century armies, all the various regiments, what they did, what happened on the battlefield with the coordination. These kind of channels skip that entirely. They just do not show you because they think that video would be too long. It's not like they wouldn't be interested or they couldn't find information, but they just focus on the views. This channel does get, admittedly, lots of views, and it's probably their field, their niche. They make money like that, and it's fine. But again, how much are you going to get back in terms of military historical wisdom from this? In my opinion, a very few. They may be good at spreading like, oh, look at all these battles. Yes, okay, but if you make, maybe you want to make people know about them, right? But once you make several hundred videos about battles, like, and they're all looking in the frame, say, told in the same fashion, homogeneous, who's going to simply, and they last relatively few as videos, who is actually going to remember that? The impression, even here, as you can see from the is that there is no great deal of characterization, right? And at the same time, not great deal of historical explanation and art of war explanation behind them. So once you have watched these videos, you may easily forget about that. And there are by the way, Total War video footages here, probably like what is War Thunder video footages. I don't even know how legal this is. I will not enter this controversy, but as you know, I am the only person probably that still uses only Wikimedia Commons copyrighted images and sticks to that. I don't think you can monetize anything made with video games unless you have a very specific partnership or whatever. And I see all these videos that take copyrighted images. I know that there is fair use, but fair use is an extremely gray area, and you have this enormous channels with millions of views that basically, let's be honest about this, completely steal pictures. Okay, I also used to do that, except I blurred them, except I didn't focus so much on them, whatever, so it could be fair use in my case. But at some point I decided, no, I don't want to risk anything. So let's simply go with, and it's that these channels are perfectly okay with that, and I understand why they do it. There is surely some level of, entertainment through that, etc. But again, if at that point you mostly invest just on the visual engagement, come on, just like children, basically stick around for that, not much the rest. Like, I would watch them anyway if I had time to waste. Let's say I don't have, fortunately, time to watch YouTube, but let's say I understand there is something a little bit like what could be invested in that video editing that surely is not even easy or cheap or brief, right? There is a lot of work behind this stuff. I will not comment here on how often they post. They post every day, but let's say, I don't know, I, for example, post all images that are actually pertinent to the very literal stuff that I'm discussing in the video. How an actual, pictures of art, archaeological artifacts, landmarks, places, pertinent to the era, not the, okay, let's show something that looks like that. And that is a historical research in and of itself. What about these channels? What are they actually doing, right? Even when you have, I don't know, beautiful Total War mods that actually show fairly accurate arms and armor, etc. Like, how, do we really want to enter the actual criticism of how much that is actually accurate, plausible, etc.? Like, I would have to open enormous parentheses on some things I saw, including, now I will tell you how the Battle of Cannae went because I used a video game to reproduce, like, literally. Like, there are and the people who, what's the worst part of that? That they present themselves as experts. So there are lots of undereducated idiots that suddenly believe that therefore there is no expertise, right? Because they have never literally learned that it exists, but they even think that they can feel ever more legitimized to say their own thing, as if there hadn't been actually a massive branch of academia already dealing with things that are not even touched on the surface by these channels. So frankly, I understand, especially younger people have this anxiety to act and look to be accepted as competent, whatever, but there are just certain things, certain homework that you haven't done and you keep not doing, right? Then here we have simple history. This seems to be, I don't like it very much. It's mostly focusing on World War II. For some reason, it's sort of video game fashion. Like they have their own original video art making, and it's all like a bit flattened. I don't know. It's even an art style that I don't particularly like, and it wouldn't be even that bad. Probably here I see especially tanks, detailed tanks sections, etc. But I've watched, I think, some of these videos once, and they are incredibly I don't know how to say that. Especially the imagery is, in my opinion, a bit unserious. It's a bit hyperbolic. It shows things too much. You could use an actual footage from especially like World War II, right? You could find more accurate imagery, more actual content. Why does it have to be about these puppets that shoot at one another? Honestly, like, why do we have to mimify history, even when we actually have the evidence, the actual imagery, the actual data? I really don't understand it. I'm sure that this thing makes lots of views and whatever, but it's all a bit too simplified, and I don't even like the art behind which I'm sure there is a lot of work, so I don't criticize that, but I just personally think that it does not properly fit with this, with the level of, say, the potential seriousness of the topics that, however, are also crammed into relatively cliche things like, I don't know, Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart. Okay, we all have watched Black Hawk Down. But is that the only thing great? These were Medal of Honor recipients, whatever, etc. But a random video of the many that you make, right? Unusual things that you didn't know about dictators, myths of war movies, life inside a nuclear radioactive, here I don't know even what it is, like what kind of, how is it important, right? How is it so important at the end of the day? It's also like grotesquely caricatured in some ways. I just don't like the approach. I'm sure it's a good channel, and again, watch it. Absolutely, I'm not going to push people not to watch as if I had even an influence regarding that. I would never say something like this. But I personally don't. I've watched it a few times. I tried to see why, for example, it would get so many views. It has 5 million subscribers, by the way. I really don't understand it. Or better, I don't want to understand it, because the reason is people. It's not the channel, really. Bellum et Historia. So the Battle of so this is all done with Total War. This is like machinima stuff, like this battle, that battle, with the cinematographic cut through Total War, right? I don't know whether it's monetized. I don't know what's the deal. It's a fairly big channel, so 300,000. Honestly, I was, as you know, at least I really was at this point, a Total War player, modder especially. But I've never really liked, I mean, I liked, of course, to watch myself similar cinematic videos based on Total War engines, but honestly, the capacity to replicate a level of plausibility or something that would actually inform with a military historical culture through these means is null, right? In order to learn military history, you must study it. You must be taught that. You require very precise. You require the sources, the maps, etc. Like just showing. Okay, let's now make a video about. I understand how seductive it is. I tried to do it with, I don't know, with dioramas when it was literal, with VHSs, etc. So these video games helped us fulfilling our, childhood dreams, right, of battles and of stuff we only watched on TV, etc. That we could command ourselves instead now, etc. But is this today relevant, especially as a form of, now let's look at this battle? What are you going to learn from that? again, seriously, what's the actual acquired thing from this? Even watching it, like if for strictly entertainmental purpose, once you have watched one video or two, it's basically all the same, right? So I don't see what's the fun in it. Then we had Dan Davis History. This guy, I've never really watched his channel, but he makes a lot of stuff about prehistory, Bronze Age, etc. He also made something about the Middle Ages, but it's mostly about various archaeological cultures of basically late prehistory, etc. So I see 20 minutes average length. Probably interesting. Probably, again, it's a guy who fairly specializes into this. Things like the strange truth about phallic imagery in the Nordic Bronze Age. Like, I understand the clickbait, or not even the bait, in the sense that I'm not saying it's a dishonest way of, but can you actually explain things like the origins of beautiful, like the beautiful women of Bronze Age Europe in 22 minutes, or the delicious diets of prehistoric Europe, 20 minutes? Again, probably this is good content, but I see like the first I click on this that there is just like a modern kitchen with a woman who prepares something. How, like, here we should. My first issue would be to condensate things in a way that are historically meaningful, and I'm sure the video eventually turns out fairly well, but couldn't there be a more historical approach? I don't know. I'm unconvinced about these approaches, and mostly I wonder how they affect people and how they, because there are different types of people. Like there are types of people who, like in this case, like they like prehistory or early history, and they're very much specific type of people, even in the approach to everyday life, right? So that maybe they're not even there for the history. Maybe these people, I'm not talking about Dan Davis as a creator, but the average watcher watches this, but maybe that truly doesn't know anything about medieval history. Maybe they have an archaeological background. They may know something, like in this case, like what kind of diet was like at the time, etc. But do they have an actual political education, a strategic culture, like some broader social awareness of how things happen? Probably no, right? It stems, especially like prehistory. I don't want to digress in this, but it's also historiographically dominated by incredibly ideological debates and scholarly rivalries that probably did not. It's mostly approached from a too materialistic approach, historically speaking, like something that just wants to explain you things making sense mechanically and not through the world of ideas, for example. Admittedly, we don't know much about that for prehistory, and it's obviously the more material side of the story that prevails in the historical method. However, again, it feels like these channels are heavily informed by that kind of background. And again, I don't judge the merit of the video. I should watch every video to know whether it's good or not. I'm just giving you my impression. Possible history. This channel, I don't know. Honestly, I would hate a channel like this because I hate what ifs. All right, I don't believe that, again, with all the actual history, which is actual reality that actually happened, and what we still have to sort out, people would waste time with what ifs. Right? I have all a beef with this, and I will explain it from a philosophical, scientific, even political point of view, why people think this. This is just sort of an alienation from reality. Because one thing is saying, okay, it's obvious. Like if you look at the Battle of Hastings, you say, well, it's that simple. Had the Anglo-Danish won, what would have happened? We can imagine in the immediate aftermath, or in general, what sort of could have happened to Britain in that context. But aside from the fact that the more you depart from the actual point in time, and the least you can really predict anything, right? Just a few months afterwards, God knows what could have happened. So it doesn't make much sense, and you should know that through the rest of history. But in this sense, what do we actually gain? This channel adds, I would think, a bit of humor to that, which is, I must give it to him that the thumbnails make me laugh, because you have, what if all things went well for this country, I don't know, during World War I or during this, and you have the actual maps of the country styled out with different facial expressions to the eyes through, the kind of country balls, memes, etc. And that is objectively funny to watch. And I understand why people are caught by, I don't know, the cute eyes or the angry eyes, etc. It may be as dumb as it is, and maybe that's the actual deal. This channel is also very successful. I would say, and we will have now the chance to discuss that this approach is very much also, I never really watched these videos, but it's more like paradox influenced. I mean, the ingredients at least are there. And again, I have no idea of how this goes, because again, how can you predict something even just a few months after they happen and try to make a uchronia about this? You can have fun, but it's fantasy. It's not history. Just you must know that, right? So even the practical usefulness of this, what it is, right? I've seen that there are even surveys like, what does the audience want for this historical event to have gone or not? Like, and they have fun like that. Again, probably there is also some good work behind that. But again, in historical terms, I wonder what it could even possibly be. This one, Norse Magic and Beliefs. So this channel is run by, if I'm not wrong, he's a Norwegian guy that plays very much into the role of this essentially, I would say, pretty self-centered kind of ethnic representation of what the Norse words are. It's basically just about that. You have things like religious comparisons of the Norse and the Greeks. Just to add to the exotic variation, multicultural variation, because I don't know, the guy went on vacations there and took some kind of time for making, by the way, short videos. Here I see a few minutes to maybe 20, this kind of things. And it's I've heard him once talking about all the various groups, Germanic groups that migrated across Europe, and I said, okay, this guy has not studied history. All right, this guy has a completely overblown sense of the importance of Germanic peoples. He just talks about this. It's basically all he does. It's not like Survive the Jive, which is a straightforwardly white supremacistic video, and there is nothing to debate about that. If you are into European tradition, you should actually study it. There is full of Indo-Europeistic studies. There is full of actual history about that. You know that on Schwerpunkt I do it too. I'm an ultra far right wing thing, but I'm beyond all this kind of weird ethno-narcissism. I'm speaking specifically of those other channels, not this one, because what this channel does, maybe, I don't know, I've never really watched it, maybe there is some of that, because they tend to be a bit all undercover. He even interviewed Survive the Jive, I can see here. But, things like in 14 minutes, DNA results versus historical sources, Viking and Germanic DNA in different countries. What can you even say in 14 minutes? And what kind of value is it even going to have from an historical point of view? Let's be honest, this is ridiculous. And this is just like a softer version of the more aggressively paganistic kind of and ethnocentric, ethnocentered Germanic of this kind, with also a bit more of, okay, let's also talk about other cultures to show that we're not racist kind of thing. And also from a historically religious point of view, this is just like the mainstream thing of there was Norse paganism, as if there wasn't an imperial Catholic tradition or whatever that is. Admittedly, almost no person knows what that means, But if you at least have had a historically religious education, academically speaking, you should know what you're talking about. Sometimes they invite people over. They do not seem to be particular experts or whatever. And again, the level of topics are relatively, overblown. There is an over characterization of this the Germanocentric aspect that I frankly find a bit, like how much can you learn about Germanic peoples if you don't widen your horizons to other type of sources or European ones, right? This is not, there are people who live in such a I'm not talking here specifically of this guy, but there are people who live in such self-referential realities that they literally think that there is just, I don't know, they have, say, Germanic ancestry, they just think as if there are just those, and that's basically what's Europe like. And if you talk about other cultures, it's non-European ones. And they literally ignore that there is a European civilization in between, to which also the Germanic one, until it sort of also exited its original boundaries, was pretty marginal too, and pretty fringe-like, and it continued to be. And the way we documented it, thankfully, in the moment in which they were technically still prehistoric people, is through those other cultures. How can you make all these videos about Germanic, Norse history without even indulging into, I don't know, let's study compared Indo-Europeistics. Let's study Rome in that. How can you study Rome? Can't you study Rome or the Vedas, etc., if you want to know anything about Norse religion? All the entire anthropology in the Europeistics revolves around that. If you make such monothematic videos, like, you immediately betray the fact that you're not into practically anything. It isn't just the scarcity, like, of the brevity of the videos, the generic attempt sort of to frame this also through the sources, as if, if you talk about sources, magically you acquire relevant. That's not how history works. The history is the critical evaluation of the sources, if anything, and that's an enormously more complicated thing than a 13 minutes long video can allow you to make. Said by a person, again, that made, like me, lots of videos about especially Germanic warfare, and that is incredibly fascinated with that, has Germanic ancestry and more. So it's really, you see, if I make this kind of criticism, there is always going to be the person who says, you're a leftist. This is what the world, unfortunately, that we live in. Then you have the history chap. This is a guy that, again, as also you can say from, here I read the description, telling stories that bring British history to life. It's yet another British-centric thing. The Damn Bastards, did Zulu get it wrong? We're talking about the movie, of course, because there is always the thing. And it's always just about the British soldiers that fought in the Papal Army of 1861. It's at least interesting, not just because of the Catholic bias here, but it's all just British stuff, and also things like the bravest man to ever wear a red coat. Again, all this tendency of, again, British kind of documentaries to also connect it to specific contemporary references, historical reference of British histories, like movies, for example, or their colonial past. Like, can't we expand? I mean, I get it. It's very interesting, but there are also perhaps more varied things you can talk about. You want to make even just British history, but does it have also to be replete with the same kind of visual reference? There is so much more, all right? And maybe this channel gets it right. I don't know. Maybe the history is very good, all right? But here the length too, 14 minutes, 20 minutes, what can you actually say, all right? It's very difficult to understand. Absolute history. And here we get, again, this is from the original series with the famous archaeologist, etc. This is also pretty meme-like, with a bit of AI and strange things, like the creepy things that for some reason the British historical documentation is obsessed with the 9-year-old girl who convicted her own family of witchcraft. Hidden killers, deadliest inventions in historic homes. What was life like in Dark Ages Britain? How many freaking videos saying absolutely nothing can you make with that title? I love so-called Dark Ages Britain, but it gives me the impression that you don't, because if all the time it's just this stereotype and it's just this sort of image, by the way, Dark Ages, and there is an image of a 15th century, by the way, not even British, but still sort of medieval looking weird stuff, manuscript illumination, just to use as a thumbnail. How do you even contextualize this as, the Dark Ages? Like, it's excessive, right? These are the kind of videos that I can't take anymore. And it's just like that, or Egypt, or especially for this series of this cluster of videos. Archaeologists uncover Britain's ancient Anglo-Saxon secrets. Oh yes, because surely in 2025 there are secrets that we have to uncover because, they're there, but it takes really this person to explain you what they are. And actually, of course, they're nothing. They're not secrets. They're things that we already know very well since ever, or maybe a new stuff that was dug up, and it's surely not here that the Saturn who helmet that is used in the thumbnail. That already tells me that in those 50 minutes of video that they have nothing to say, because if you use a thumbnail like that, it's just a clickbait, and I think that whatever content is in it, maybe the best historical inquiry ever, the disrespect that you show to that by making this all a meme in such a dumb fashion, it deserves not whatever there is in the video not to be watched. All right. Then we have this war stories, which revolve expectedly around World War II. Mauthausen concentration camp, the legacy of Winston Churchill, Hitler, swastikas, Hitler, D-Day landing, Hitler, swastikas. This is all the story, and you immediately understand how, again, repetitively useless from a historical point of view this can be. Really, how, at this point, read books. We have all watched documentaries about National Socialism, and we know how much one after the other is completely useless, and it doesn't literally say anything, right? That we already didn't know. The people profiles. So this is a channel dedicated to just single historical figures, and there is just like the AI art of the guy in realistic terms on the thumbnail, like pretty big. This is also very sort of British referential in many ways. Bit of obsession with British royals and with things connected with, I don't know, that idea of a bit of colonial past, like Jinnah. Just yesterday I made a video about the partition of India, Suleiman, a bit just to be like, and the Queen, and Clementine Churchill, Tudor queens, and Elizabeth, Commodus the Mad Emperor. Like, why there's also a bit of a morbid obsession with Russian stuff, because the Russians, the Tsars and Nicholas II and all this stuff, it's unbearable to an extent. All right, and I see the stuff lasts an hour each. Probably these are documentary style things, and again, here I don't understand why the pictures start with random videos of, I presume, what these people should be, like babies or young women that however contemporary videos footages. So they're unspecific. It's not like, I don't know, this baby's Commodus in a Roman palace. It's just like the face of a baby. Why do I have to watch that? Like, who the hell cares? And why do you have to characterize Commodus as a mad emperor with an ugly face? It's sort of weird. All right, I don't like this type of presentation, and even if I do not discuss an historical work, but whatever. Then the SPQR historian. This is more similar, just to say, to as a personality guess, like others will see now, to my own style, to my own kind of thing. And this concentrates mostly on emperors, Roman emperors. I can see. Just today I clicked on it and there were lots of people complaining about the AI. I don't know whether the images or because I didn't watch the video, or the voice, and they were saying, oh my god, this channel lost views because nobody watches it because it's just AI and whatever. I don't know what it's doing, but say an 8 minutes long video on the Roman Aedile, or the quest, or the praetor, the consul. I made the entire story, but again, 8 minutes. The original was 21 in months ago. Then it went down 14, 9, 8 minutes. So again, yes, these are also less important magistracies, telling the truth in the chronological order, but 20 minutes is the average, all right, even less. So again, I personally don't know how much can be sent. I see there is some graphic elaboration, the usual thing that shows you maps that move with the name of the cities, and the picture of the portrait of the emperor in the capital, and so that makes you understand that, oh my god, this is an actual moving map. It's so interesting, historically speaking, right? You can show everything you want, but that's going to be the thing that people fixate with. It's, again, I know I sound like an a-hole, but again, this is not the type of history I like. This one is terrible. Medieval Madness. So this channel is, and how many videos can you even sort out? Like, even thinking to have a future on YouTube, like of actually expandable topics, essentially depicting gross stuff, misrepresenting the Middle Ages as a pool of mental illness and terrifying things. There is a guy who is, I don't tell you what he's doing. He said, yes, this was a true job. Because for some reason, in British documentaries, there is something, what was the worst job ever, the most disgusting job in the Middle Ages? Have you ever asked anyone like for that in the modern age, or in ancient history? No, it has to be the Middle Ages, right? The extenuating life of a medieval horse, the harsh life of a medieval butcher, medical advice in the Middle Ages that did not age well, cutting your hair in the Middle Ages, how to dance in the Middle Ages, surviving in the Middle Ages as a witch/wizard, polygamy in the Middle Ages, inhuman practices in the Middle Ages, medieval millionaire versus peasant, excuse me. Especially the thumbnails are disgusting. They're barely pornographic. They are disgusting. They show extreme violence, grotesque things. It's objectively, like, already for the disrespect that it makes to the era. Like, instead of sort of celebrating the Middle Ages for the shockingly advanced civilization that it was, you perpetuate this nasty vision of it, just for winking at undereducated people. Frankly, I understand it. It's like a bad joke, and you can do whatever you want, but I hope you get many views, whatever each of these channels deserve. Like, every channel, more views if it is about history and makes people talk about it, I'm glad about it. But the message is honestly pretty bad, all right? And I really don't like it. Then Emperor Tiger Star. This guy makes a very good job, actually, of creating, say, every historical war every day, making the map evolving day by day. There's an enormous work behind it. I admire it a lot. It's a very famous channel. Nothing to say about this. I see there's a bit of extra stuff about probably video games, Civilization 7, this kind of stuff. So I understand where it stems from, this kind of, that's how it went, right? bit too much deterministic view of the world, can say too much geopolitical in nature. It's actually a great work altogether, and it shows pretty much like it offers like this very precise documentation of probably geographical space and how things change during wars, the fronts, the front lines, the conquered, lost territories, etc. Like it's very good. So at least this has, I understand. I may disagree with the general philosophy of maybe whatever this person believes. I don't know, but the work is at least useful, right? I've never used it. I would not need to use it because yes, it may also have a limited expandability, but at least there is an enormous historical work behind that. It would be really interesting to see how he does that. Maybe it's simpler than it seems, but say drawing the map for every single day is really incredible. The rest is history. This stuff is two middle-aged guys talking about that, commenting on this bit British-centric set of topics. Again, the morbid obsession with Russia, World War II, the Anglo-Saxons, why he was the confessor, but Edward the Confessor, the rise of the Normans, how French were they? And there's the picture of a kid with a crown, like of a toddler, as a matter of fact, with a crown. How not to fight Vikings with a guy with naked torso that is about to slash like an axe against you. The Anglo-Saxon apocalypse. Can we stop? Seriously. The French Revolution, guillotine people. Like, guys, I understand that this stuff sells in a particular subcultural reality, but let's be honest about like this. The effort on this content could be equally spent for something much more useful, for actually educating people. Like, we would actually live in a better society if that happened. But so there is then weird history. This is really weird, and I really don't like it just because of the theme. Like, you have I don't know, mostly like TV show references, movies, series from the 90s. Okay, I'm fine. The Sopranos, fine. Xena, fine. Baywatch, Pamela Anderson, fine. All right, but other stuff, it's also like, I mean, who cares about this stuff? I don't even know what they're talking about, but they are fairly short videos, 10 minutes, whatever, and they mostly revolve around, in fact, more than weird history, like TV culture, I presume. So it's okay. Tasting History with Max Miller. This is actually a very successful channel. This one of the guys of those guys who had an actual job, and he said, okay, I stopped doing that because of YouTube videos. This is basically this guy is a cook or sort, and he makes a video for every specialty that would have been, every dish, every meal that would have been served in a particular context in history. You have the Kaiserschmarrn from the Austrian Empire feeding the Papal Conclave, what medieval fast food restaurants, and the actual point of this is that he actually cooks the thing and then he makes the documentary on it. Again, I wouldn't really know how to spend this channel. However, it's pretty good content in terms of quality. It's pretty solid, so if anybody's interested. Kings and Generals. All right. Kings and Generals is a big channel. I have already made video commentaries on their videos. It's arguably the most successful military historical, not necessarily the art of war or anything overly sophisticated at the end of the day, but channel on YouTube, right? It's enormous. I would say this, they concentrate mostly on something that sells. It's fine. They talk a lot about World War II, they have a lot of bias for the 18th century, as opposed, say, to the 17th for modern warfare, or maybe Hellenistic warfare, as opposed to the Roman one. They, of course, cover really a lot of stuff. They have really increased also the rate of videos they publish almost, like, I think every couple of days. very polished videos, highest graphic effects available, etc. They're fairly short videos anyway. Sometimes I listen to their scripts, and because it's such a big enterprise that they have, as I understand it, very different people who write the scripts. All right, not just they're expert in different things, but they may have different mandates. I don't know how the system works. It's pretty big, likely, and the information is good, right? I don't have any particular issue with that, but some may not be, and this was pointed out on many Reddit. If anything, I must say in some cases, because I don't know, for example, I remember a video about the Crusades from the Muslim perspective. It was incredibly flat video. Like, you can't explain that in 15 minutes or so. It was just based on this fixation that let's cite 3 sources from the Muslims without kind of context. And the video ended by saying, today it's like now that there are always the Westerners coming with their warships against the Near East. What the fuck? Like, what? And I understood at that point that they're mostly chasing views, I guess, in the Islamic world, so to say, that they bend a little bit, maybe the narrative to, and some videos are really disappointing. Probably if I watch it more, I would be more disappointed. I think they simplify a bit too much because the content is not too long, but some of it is longer. I don't know. Most of it is like 15-20 minutes. I honestly, again, the information is summed up fairly well, but sometimes it also makes you wonder, what do you go with that? There are many videos that I would have liked to comment. The point is that sometimes it's off-putting, even in this perspective, because, for example, I was watching, at least reading the script of this one, who was the heir of Rome. They basically make a list of people that claim to be the heirs of Rome, and at the end they say, well, for them it was, it's difficult, at the end of the day it's impossible to say which was the heir of Rome, end of the video. Some information was good, like some details they offer is good, etc. But again, before and after watching this video, has anything really changed? It's not like you had to actually answer what was the heir of Rome. Like, can we frame the question in some sort of broader terms, making some more critical point, or even balancing yourself a bit to cause it? These are sometimes topics that are they present just because they presume that people are going to click on it because they have developed a sense of epicness around the channel that is the only one that makes it in this sort of graphical and fairly entertaining terms, and that covers a bit everything with this kind of magic behind it, right? Great work behind it, surely, but I don't know whether by watching so many videos of this kind, people actually develop a specifically refined type of historical criticism about the content. In any case, it's a good channel to say the least, and so it goes. I can't really say anything too bad about it at all. Then history with CI. I don't know what this guy does. He's mostly about ancient history, and I don't know what he does. Honestly, never watched his content. It's a lot of ancient Egypt, archaic Greece, ancient Mesopotamia. I see, so probably specializes on that. I see some content is longer, some is shorter. Probably there isn't too much behind it. It doesn't even post too often. For example, this one, Herodotus in India, 8 minutes long. Whatever may be said, may be a good notion to learn. I think I even watched that, or not, I don't remember, but this is exactly the point. Like, what do you expect to get from it? And especially if it is, like, at least only in this case, reading, citing Herodotus, or right around that, okay, what are we going to squeeze out of it? What kind of deeper philological, historical, and cultural criticism can we derive from the way Herodotus saw India? Probably a lot, something maybe for 2 hours of video. 8 minutes, why? Nutty Productions. This is a mix of, again, probably all the nutty kind of, I don't want to use another term, but let's say all the weirdest stuff, mix of AI, TV, this This AI thumbnails are terrible. I don't even know if they use it in the video, but of people shouting, right? The thing of thumbnails is to show shock stuff that, oh, look, it has that face. Who does fall for this stuff? If I look at that thumbnail, as I said before, I don't even want to watch anything anymore. I'm not really interested. Here, this is not Redeemed Zoomer is not really a history of religion channel, right? But may contain some of that, and generally speaking, it's a bit too meme-based, kind of too compact content to talk religion seriously. And if anything, he has guests, etc. But anyway, ICMA history. This talks mostly about the Islamic world, contemporary era. 20 minutes, 15 minutes, the usual format. Islam versus the West, Kurds ruled Iran, the Timurid Empire, is Islam compatible with the West? Again, interesting topics, but 14 minutes, why? Seriously, I don't even want to know what he thinks, really, or what his background is. It's just, why? Why, seriously, 14 minutes? It's a bit too, again, whenever I see contemporary history content, I often see too often of a specifically political point to them and some sort of take on the thing rather than some plain objective history. Because again, in 14 minutes, all what we know about contemporary history is very difficult, even for a relatively small topic, to be radically and deeply eviscerated and explained, right? Alternate History Hub. Honestly, I detest this channel. First of all, because of the what if, but mostly because, and I don't know, it's maybe as good as the other what if one, because of the puppets that they use. These puppets that are just like a meme. Everything is like a meme. Everything is like a country ball over on top of some apparently historical or very stereotypical actually cloth, such as, I don't know, an Anglo-Saxon guy that is just a green creature with a white dragon on it, like, or it's too much like a cartoon. I mean, you could say everything, maybe even the most historically accurate thing, which surely with videos are not even too short, like half an hour sometimes, etc. But I don't like the coding of this. I don't like the fact that it's treated like a cartoon and that you have to explain historical topics like cartoons. I don't care if, as presumably this is just for kids, or presumed to be. I see huge amounts of views. It's also on top of this based on what if. So it's not history technically. It's just like a cartoon, and it's also a cartoon with faces. That's the thing that I don't like. It makes expressions as if everybody was driven by some sort of weird emotion that we need to have to caricaturize or make fun of. So to de-dramatize some of the most violent and ruthless times in history. So again, I just don't like this, and I'm even philosophically adverse to the what if thing. Again, also in this case, I don't want, maybe it's great work. This is probably a very successful channel, one of the most successful out there. So congratulations to that. I have no beef again against anyone here, but I personally just could not stand. And again, I'm sure that if I actually watched these videos, I would like them, just like one of other channels probably. But at the same time, I would say, other than food for thought, and say, where do we talk the serious history on YouTube? If this is the basic, is the average approach, and this is the most watched stuff, where's, okay, just, this is a teaser, let's assume, where's the interesting discussion? Maybe just in universities, it could be, but can't we also talk a bit in a more elevated fashion on YouTube, and so that people maybe that, I do not know, that don't have an education can get a better one, also through actual historical academic lessons online? Why all this effort dedicated to this kind of format? Because it makes money, I presume. But, isn't there a way, unfortunately, to make money to make sort of better stuff? Evidently not, because this is exactly what the algorithm and the content is sort of mutually based on. And this depends on people, unfortunately. So it's everybody's fault for watching it, for making it, for rewarding it, as opposed to better stuff. Real Crusades history. These people were very rude to me once on a Facebook group talking several years ago. These are the guys who, at least at the time, passed for we are the experts in Crusades warfare. Here I see basically they began putting all their videos together to make 7 hours long stuff, that kind of approach, right? And actually their videos are fairly very short. They use, also in this case, Total War footage. I don't even know if they can monetize this. Again, it would be incredibly unfair if that is the case. Total War video footage. This is what they resort to grab attention. 20 minutes. I made Crusade history videos like any other of 2 hours long, even for battles, looking at all the sources, actually criticize these people have considerable success, but I also see they don't upload that often. Also because probably also either they got tired or maybe they weren't even just that into the thing themselves. Probably they were academics themselves, and I'm an academic too, but at least maybe I even make more views paradoxically with all the stuff I make, and I refine further my knowledge in the process, as opposed to this sort of more attemptive kind of videos to describe the Crusades. Then Épisode d'Histoire, this is a French channel. I don't like, I see AI on every thumbnail. This already puts me off, right? It's too generic. National Socialism, the Empire of Japan, Christianity. This is a bit French, maybe like the Mongol Empire. Everybody shouts. The war in Mexico. Everybody cries in the thumbnail. This is a kind. I don't even want to know what they say. They are overloading both the thumbnail and the titles with sort of emotionalism, with visualism, mixing, history with references to movies. I don't like that. Again, the information is always the same, like 20 minutes long videos, okay, fairly generic topics, big topics in history, so without even any specific type of in-depth research. I don't particularly like the approach to this, then I don't know. Serapeum Historia, I don't know exactly what this is. Never really watched this videos, doesn't upload often. It's mostly about the Byzantines, Greeks, Middle Ages mostly Byzantine stuff. Even in this case, 10-15 minutes long videos, even less. It's mostly like a very apparently Byzantine or Greek based stuff. There's also some Roman stuff from the earlier days, Wars of the Roses. So they're maybe a bit selective. They decided to mostly cover these topics. Again, the reign of Basil the Macedonian in 17 minutes. I don't doubt it can be done with some relevant information, but what is it actually adding to the overall vision of Byzantine history? I don't really know. Glad that there is this content online, but not much that it gets. It's a small channel, telling you the truth, so it doesn't get too much views. But let's say a video like that before, still got way more than my average one. And so again, how and why? If you want to listen to Byzantine history in some level of depth, surely a much greater level of depth than these channels, I have plenty of myself, right? YouTube doesn't show you, but it shouldn't be our fault for that matter. We have The Crusader. This is a meme channel. 1-2 minutes long videos, like Caribbean islands be like, ancient religions be like, series of jokes, of memes, of cartoons, so we're not even taking it seriously. History in bits. This is again the average 20-minute thing. People, why these borders? There's a map of France. Why these borders with the arrows pointing at the map with the date according to the border indicated. This is also a heavily, I think, civilization video game based thing, right? Explaining you, I'll look at the hidden gems, these polities that existed here in the Holy Roman Empire. Let's go look at them in the game. Okay, but isn't it better to maybe here, Matilda of Tuscany, fan favorite. Do you need Crusader Kings video game to actually talk about Matilda of Tuscany? Right? Can't you talk about Matilda in general? And I'm sure that the video does, right? But in 16 minutes, how far and wide can you actually describe at the end of the day in depth this thing, or add to the to the originality of it all? And to how much can you expand the person's understanding, right? It will just the video is made because there is a video game that talks about it. So this content is inherently winking at the guys who played that video game to say, oh look, there is Matilda of Tuscany. Here's that kind of historical character that we know of. Oh, how cool they added it here, and we know who Matilda was really, and actually most people don't even know who she was or why she emerged in that context. Maybe this is very typical on YouTube, that maybe people know this because of a video game, but they literally lack the entire history surrounding it. And they presume they actually instead know, because they think that knowing history is maybe just having this map from the game and knowing of Matilda of Tuscany, right? So it's very, very weird in a sense. How well is the Byzantine Empire portrayed in Crusader Kingdoms 3? In which sense? Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't play this video game, and I don't want to even say negative things, but it's obviously just an approximation for the sake of why are we even discussing a video game instead of the actual history behind it. They could tell you, but we actually do, because we are actually exactly making the comparison. Really, in 15 minutes, right? Talking about entire Byzantine history on top of a game. Can you do that? Well, if you do, congratulations. I highly doubt that is the case. Mr. Laser History. This doesn't pause from quite a while. Medieval guilds, the final solution of the German question, most powerful Austrian in history, undermining the Athenian democracy, Putin's fake history, regent without a king. This is sort of varied stuff. And again, the videos are not very long, so again, the same problem. Like, how much is it actually said? Maybe here, like, Germans of Czechoslovakia, what happened? 47 minutes, right? But the others, like, maybe, I don't doubt, again, as always, that there may be actual historical substance behind this, but to which extent, it's difficult to say. Josh Sullivan, History. America's only king. This is yet another what if, which always used for some reason, like counter balls memes for some reason. If the HRE survived, what if America stayed neutral in World War I? What if Germany never reunited? What if Franz Joseph was assassinated? What if Japan was divided after World War II? The question is, why? Okay, you want to play that game, but then what do you think you can achieve? Right? Because I heard some of this stuff, and the question is, it's not just like we don't really know, let's show that it's basically a useless purpose. No. there is all an actual parallel history that they develop, presuming that it would happen without any actual evidence that there is any level of predictability to that. And so just arbitrarily inventing, making up a story that you wish, mostly evidencing at that point your historical gaps, historical knowledge gaps, more than any actual historical skill, because again, there is no way to know what would have actually happened eventually, and you just want to present an idea. For what? For whom? Who's going to do anything with that? And how can you simply, and you teach people thinking that there's actually a right answer to that, and they even fall into the trap, and there is not, because it's not a thing, and so it is actually a problem. And I don't really like how the whole thing is presented. TikTok history. I think I know this guy. I think this is a very controversial guy. I heard Veritas and Caritas criticizing the historical reliability of this guy. I will not comment on him, but basically this is a bit of a contemporary history based World War II, Hitler, Lenin, fascism, Hitler, whatever, and voices are that the guy is a bit biased and at least has not really that authority that he's supposed to represent from a historical point of view regarding these topics. I know because I've seen some examples of how he was debunked, he created controversy. Surely he runs a successful channel. Should these channels exist on YouTube? I have no problem with that. Except lots of people tend to fuel these channels just because they hope that they're saying something as if, I don't know, fascism could return or fascism was actually right. This is the new history that was hidden to us. And when we don't go that way. Empire Builders. So this is a relatively new channel that started making a series of videos that initially were very successful, then they sort of decline a little bit, treating a bit history like, let's look at the badasses of history, let's represent this controversial topic in terms like, I don't know, the Merovingians, rising like a mafia mob because they were like a family, like these terms, they came up pretty powerfully, but I don't think they also, because probably they have a very good, technical capacity. I don't know, probably what I see here is just the fixed image. This is at least part of those serious channels that use the copyright-free Wikimedia Commons, the same stuff that I use, without actual crediting though, because that still requires crediting that I give, these others don't. The image changes, moves, and that's supposed to make fair use thing because you can see the wall, and it changes and they go on, and probably they even offer good info, but they make videos like the Pope who made a pact with the devil, how one family made the Dark Ages less dark, sometimes referring to the Ottonians, by the way, so making like all a case for Beast of the Apocalypse, the life and times of Frederick II, so surrounded by satanic goats, I don't know for which reason. Very picturesque, I must say, and in this sense maybe stimulating, but here the guys also pretty much shrank the videos to the 15 minutes long thing after having started with longer stuff. And so I think these are the kind of people who surely looked very scientifically at YouTube stats and how to get views, etc. But they also had this initial elan, and they, according to their vision of plan, like maybe history / cinematic approach to at least the allegor, the thumbnail and titles allegories, probably have already exhausted that original push, right? Because also these channels, you realize that they may talk sometimes about more in-depth stuff, but they do not focus on that per se. right? I, by default, not just focus on topics in depth, but I focus basically on everything in whichever topic in depth, and make lots of videos on the same that is supposed to build up. These guys seem to mostly chase at large, all these channels, what can get the views in the moment. All right, and so they move from a major topic to another to chase, in fact, those views, but not really thinking that there is an overall strategy to fill the gaps on the longer run, because they're just even trying in the moment to make the big views, and God knows if they even get it. The cynical historian. This guy, if I'm not wrong, is a bit of a leftist or a liberal, I don't know. Some things I agree with, like, I don't know, Tucker Carlson has promoted Russian propaganda. I don't know why there is a Tiger Star figure there. Maybe this was an interview, I think, or they're cooperating, I don't know. There is some things are relatable. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily that he makes bad stuff, but I think, I don't want to be mistaken, but I think they're a bit liberal leaning, and so at least in general I would disagree with their interpretation of history. But I see Emperor Tiger Star participating because I see him often in the corner of the thumbnail, so probably he is inviting him over, right? Varied topics of the same, mostly Anglo-American interest and sort of more controversial. Here, for example, they made that stupid series on those, that tribe that was supposedly ruled by women, that they had to make the woke video, the woke series on in the United States or something like that. And this guy makes a video with the thumbnail from a scene from that thing. It says "Woman King in Dahomey Amazons," based on a true story. And I don't know whether he actually debunks that as well, but in any case, he's a bit political. He talks here about Democrats, Republicans, so it's mostly that vibe, and says systemic racism exists in the USA, so whichever debate they make, I'm sure they're pretty politically loaded, and I wouldn't think specifically they're just for the historical objectivity, mostly to make a point. Fine, but I think be aware of it. Sorcerer Dave, this is actually video game based stuff, I think so, yeah. Dominus Maximus, this is, I think, a meme based YouTube channel. Surely it is, at least from judging from the thumbnail, there's some of that, right? And this is at least, even if he talks at some point about actual history, does that through memes, and the videos are fairly short, and I don't think thus it's maybe this huge deal. It focuses mostly on Rome. Then how history works. I think I know this channel. Basically, this is a structuralistic, liberal, not leftistic thing, and it literally tells you, this is why rich people don't want you to let you know how social history is, because they want to have the power and whatever. So I actually, here is a title: How Europe's Richest Man Cornered the World's Dumbest Market. It's all based on that, like how the rich ate India, or why England is so ugly, or whatever. Well, maybe some things are maybe interesting, but I once heard something they said, and I don't even want to know exactly how they navigate around that thing. Then we have the Fortress of Lug, which is basically a Celtic history based channel. And it's all like those ethnic based channels. This is a bit like the aforementioned one of the Norse, etc. And it's about the origins of these people. They all focus on the what your ancestry is, but in terms of who is actually a Celt or not, right? That's mostly the vibe of the story. So it is, a bit ethno-nationalistic, ethnocentristic, and whatever. It's not like they ever talk about, it's always tribes and stuff, and they never talk about the actual Roman Empire, because that is bad. It's centralizing, leftistic, multiculturalistic thing. Yeah, sure. That's the actual historically accurate version of the Roman Empire. It's always the same narrative. These are tribalists and people who would like basically to paganistically fracture the world, and to sell the notion that there was this special people that for some reason was underdeveloped and didn't really achieve much, and was taken over by others in the first place. So it's painful to see, and people mostly join. If you actually look at the comments, it's always, this is my culture, this is my tradition, this is my identity because I'm a real Celt. Well, the vibe is that, regardless also of what the content gets down to. And again, it's too narrow in scope also to be credible about the actual accuracy of the same Celtic history provided, right? So I don't really, I disapprove the reasons why these channels are supported, because it's not history most of the times. All right, it's not to say I deal with a lot of Celtic history. Admittedly, that's the only field for which I complain mostly against the whining, the continuous perennial whining. I mean, Romanocentrists, Germanocentrists, whatever, do not whine as much as Celtocentrists. The Celtocentrists always throw this tantrum. There's this passive aggressiveness, this sort of alienation about the macroscopic evidence of what happened in the history of Europe, the similarity of the Celts and the Italics, for example. You will never find any of this on the channel, because or even if you find it, it's anecdotal, and it's the main message is no. The Celts are just the purest guys out there, and they never blended with anyone. They always resisted. We're always that's not really how it went down. And again, any person listening to me, maybe from their audience, would say, you're a leftist, you're for immigrants, or whatever. They don't even suspect who I am. And it's difficult to cope with these people, and that's how catchy and simple these messages are for them. I also discussed this with Veritas and Caritas, that acknowledges the fact that I'm a far right wing and also had a civilized conversation with me, as we pointed out, how these dynamics actually work. And again, there is a level of historical awareness that has nothing to do with being political in a sense or another, but actually could be used to be ever more in a way or another, understanding that simply what the average people think or understand is trash. In any case. Then there is this one ancient site, which is, I see, mostly about late antiquity, migration era, right around their later empire, etc. A few videos after all, I think. How many videos? Not even 30. It's not even a fairly new channel. It posts rarely. It seems to make a bit longer videos than the average, maybe. Not really. I think those bigger ones are the sum of the former ones. Or maybe some change in the length, I don't know. And they made a fair amount of views, mostly tens of thousands of views each. But again, 18 minutes, 13 minutes, 17 minutes. Again, how much can you say about Attila or Theodosius the Great, or Julian, Constantine, Diocletian, etc.? Again, I made lots of videos about each, longer than 2 hours, and I surely made more views than the single videos on them in the process. Leather Apron Club. This guy is a sort of pretty consistent conservative, to say the least. He talks about political stuff. He debunks historical inaccuracies, especially those things like Alexander was homosexual, etc. And actually, he makes pretty good content. I am sure, I don't know, maybe knowing him more politically, maybe you would dislike him, but he's very fact-based. He's very critical. He's very, good with sources. He makes his homework. So I actually recommend this channel, even though, and I like what he's saying here. At least here it recognizes, for example, from the American election that both sides are clowns. which may be also like a random statement. But again, considering the guy, knowing his work, I think he criticizes Russell Brand, that now is the new hero of pseudo-conservatives, just because, he converted to Christianity, as if, a person who had that kind of mindset or lifestyle just had complex speaking capacities, was by default just like somebody you have to worship. That's the kind, unfortunately, of average conservative intelligence there. So again, I very much I don't watch Leather Apron Club, but his content is actually pretty good, and I recommend it. Then we have Modern History TV. Oh my god, I hate this guy. Seriously, I mean, I never watched his stuff, but this is a guy who makes this kind of videos. A day in the life of a medieval inn. Basically, 3/4 of the channel revolve around medieval inns, because people in their silly fantasy mental trips have to set their sort of feministic, again, imagination, because that's what fantasy is at the end of the day, Gnosticism and feminism, and lack of education, fundamentally, into inns, right? It's all about inns. It's about, that's the Middle Ages. Everything happened in inns, and inns are magic and special and whatever. And this channel is basically about that. And you have this kind of, where did peasants sleep when on a journey? Did medieval peasants have pants? Was wearing the wrong shoes a crime? Like, sometimes, I'm sure there is how to use a medieval inn. Yeah, because that's an actual serious problem that all great scholars are wondering about the Middle Age. Surely you cannot know medieval history if you don't have this. Here he has a co-op with Scalagrim. So it's this guy who's forever looking like a pilgrim that sometimes rides a horse and tells you, oh, look, this was like it was in the Middle Ages. What food killed the king? Did you know about this armor? Medieval pigs caused havoc. Biggest medieval sword ever. Murder was not a crime. Again, this is probably a reenactor or whatever. He's probably passionate about this work, but do we have to be even serious about this? This is a rhetorical question. Do we even need to answer this? Thank you. So, history time. This is famous, and it has a lot of fairly good videos, I think, about similar topics of the kind that we're browsing. It has very good visuals. Probably he integrates very good also video footage. It's pretty proper also in the kind of art that is surely made on purpose for the channel. So it's actually something that I would recommend for that side of the story, because it talks about also relatively, like, I don't know, Göbekli Tepe, The Last Romance, Ireland Begins, The Age of Heroes. It talks a bit like Bronze Age, also late antiquity, the Hittites. You have a mix of ancient Mesopotamia, maybe generic topics, but he seems to make long enough videos, and there is really enough. I don't know where it gets down, like when he started. I have no idea, never watched his content, but it seems at least a bit more polished and refined than most videos. Right, the Turks enter Anatolia, 1016, 1071, 42 minutes. Yeah, it may be good. I don't know, because I never followed him. Then, Voices of the Past. This also apparently is, people on Reddit say, this is such a great channel, it's reliable, because it actually cites sources. So making half of the video reading a source, this would make allegedly the video historical. So without criticizing the context or whatever, making just these example for first-hand accounts of civilizations being wiped out. 5 terrified real reactions to seeing new weapons for the first time. Again, 20 minutes, as always, the same old story. Maybe good graphics, but also pretty standard in some ways. It's always this either video footages or images moving. Like, does it actually add much to historical quality? Do average people actually think that this is maybe for the person who has no historical education, really hearing this account is relevant, but do not think that you can actually just go by that when you're learning history, or that it is even a thing, because history again is the critical reading of sources, which is something that in general, I'm sure the channel may absolutely do in its own regard, but if it is based on that, this is, in my opinion, like, you need the expert that tells you what it actually means, that gives you a broader narrative, that talks about so many different sources at once, or doesn't even talk about them, but knows how things went because he has studied them. And so always remember, it's not by citing a source that you acquire more historical relevance. All right? You can also go all the way without and still being perfect. It's perfectly, really very highly accurate and competent and authoritative. Let's not make this simple and silly mistake of pretending that just you cite things and you're fine. Okay, this is not for the channel. This is for people who watch the channel. Ancient history guy. This guy makes mostly units, historical military units videos with that kind of meme puppets dressed with the various clothes and the guy has. Again, he makes interesting. If anything, it's interesting how he finds the various things to cover, and they, admittedly, the thumbnails and the animations look fairly good, but they're very short videos. I make military historical units videos, and I spent hours describing their equipment, the function of the unit. We talk about so much. This is just about how I think like the equipment was, so informing a bit this sense of they look just like that, and it's also basically ancient history. Talks weapons. It's also something about single commanders, but mostly it's military historical units. And again, Carthaginian war elephants 3 minutes long. And at the beginning of the video, it's not even, it starts with information. There is a guy who should be the historian, the creator, that is in front of a fireplace with a library that tells you, now let's talk about this. So you lose even other time. Carthaginian Navy, 3 minutes. Excuse me, what are you saying about the Carthaginian Navy at 3 minutes? That's sort of very weird. A Sacred Band of Carthage, 10 minutes. Like, if you want to educate people about this stuff, well, why don't you make 1 hour? Because there is actually content for 1 hour, and it's actually would be very informative. Or even more than 1 hour for that matter. So what is that you're actually, because you see, the idea of these channels making short videos should be also, okay, if you make the best synthesis in the world, and you say, wow, in 10 minutes he said everything, it's genial how he came up with that, so deep. No, it's just, it stops to something like, I don't know, this is how they were equipped. Now make the list of the arms and armor, and it ends there. Right? Doesn't even begin to tell what that unit actually was and why it existed, how it fought, where it fought, like, nothing, right? This is actually a problem. Study of antiquity and the Middle Ages. These guys also were rude to me at some point, but it's not much of a problem. They talk, if I'm not wrong, a bit with history. It's on Facebook groups, by the way, because nobody really interacted with me later, fortunately, with this. 20 minutes videos, 20 minutes, it's always the same. Mostly ancient history. I don't think Magyar origins in 12 minutes, Khazar origins in 12 minutes, Irish origins, actually 35 minutes, 2 million views. Is it actually good, right? In time, non-binary medieval warrior. They made a video like that, so that raises, in my opinion, a massive red flag regarding what this is all about, what kind of philosophy stands behind this historical inquiry. The sunken sciences, Atlantis does not exist. So they try to correct conservative, at least history in a way, or at least, conspiracy theories to show you, look, we have the actually good history and the others no. I'm not pronouncing myself on Atlantis, because I will surely say something on Atlantis that nobody has ever said at some point, not even all those people who are really charlatans who just want to sell you the myth of Atlantis without even knowing what it actually meant in tradition or why, right? So I'm not triggered by these guys not knowing about Atlantis themselves, but if you make the video about the non-binary Viking warrior, question mark aside, I'm not going to be particularly thrilled. Apparently, this is say many people watch this channel because it's sort of a plain, normal history kind of documentary style format. Again, nothing specifically to say against the content because I never watched them, but it's also a bit too plain, a bit too neutral, a bit too vanilla, and or having that, in fact, normal basic documentary, maybe structuralist bias, or maybe just, I don't know, here's the average version of history, and let's not venture where it gets actually more difficult. History matters. This is ridiculous. 3 minutes, 4 minutes long videos. All right. Why was Brest-Litovsk so harsh? I made a video commentary of one of these. Why wasn't France in the HRA? I made an entire video response about that. That's a 3 minutes long video. I made a 2 hours long response just to show them, or to show people in general. Again, I don't have any particular thing against these channels per se, but admittedly, most other questions are at least here because the format is mostly a question type. Why did Mexico choose an Austrian? I mean, if you don't know the answer and you have never really considered that, these videos may actually even be useful. Right, so they don't post very often, by the way, even at multiple weeks from one another, right? So again, some I will not comment on the topics choices. That would be the best way to criticize this, but say they're pretty random, sometimes even insightful questions, but it's just the 3 minutes answer to be pretty off-putting, telling the truth. History battles 3D. So this is, I don't know whether they use Total War engine or they have an engine on their own. Essentially, I think they have an engine on their own, and they have all videos about famous battles, say Pharsalus, Watling Street, Poitiers, Malden, Crécy, Stamford Bridge, Hastings, Bannockburn. You get the gist of that. It's mostly, again, Wars of the Roses, 100 Years' War, mostly Anglo-centric stuff. 15 videos only. They made a considerable amount of views, and they have like 50,000 subscribers. The only thing about this thing is that it starts, as far as I understand, from the standpoint of presenting battle 3D battle footages through these, I don't know whether it's their engine or whatever, essentially presenting it as this is actually how the real battle went down. This is how it would have actually looked like. No, right? Nor the behavior of the unit, nor the formations, nor the distances, nor the general outlook, regardless of the beautiful picture per se, as a imagery in general, is actually not how battles were fought. All right, battles had an inherent logic. I specialize exactly in that. I reconstruct that for a living as a PhD in medieval warfare. I can assure you that that's not how you would go. If you cooperated with a channel like mine, which I don't see how, however, because I'm really on my own and I want to stay like that, I could simply tell you how to create with that engine something that looks more real. But if you make, also in this case, 14 minutes, 17 minutes, 20 minutes, for battles that lasted hours, it's obvious that you have to make something that is not historically realistic. It doesn't even come close to it, regardless of how also you treat it as a movie with cuts, etc. Right? So, again, this is an experiment. I understand it. It's good, again, that all these channels exist in a way. But let's also distinguish the wheat from the chaff here. History dose. We have to accelerate though because we have less than an hour left for my technical means. History dose, a bit weird. It looks a bit like too much AI art. There is some medieval warfare. We see things like Vikings versus Irish. What a ninja attack will look like, Jamaicans versus British. So I don't know how they deal with this in 12 minutes. They have some dedicated art. I see they point very much on the graphic side of the story, but it's also a bit, it's just the pictures. I don't know how much the actual method of analysis is. Surely in 14 minutes, you can't really explain the Battle of Trafalgar to a decent art of war fashion. It's a big channel. They talk knight versus pirate war. Why do we even have to be presented with this stuff? Right, seriously. Flashpoint history. This looks again, it's always 20 minutes. It talks about different, I don't remember whether this is more like it focuses on the age of exploration, talks a bit more, I think they're Iberian or something, they have a Spanish bias of some sort. I don't know, they seem to make longer videos before I see video footages. Probably it's not this overwhelming analysis. I see animation though with some videos, so probably this is not bad compared to the other channels. It's also fairly successful, it seems. However, I don't think it really gets anywhere itself with much of in-depth art of war analysis. It's just like a storytelling with good graphic effects. Told in Stone, this also passes for like old style documentary, mostly talking about antiquity and a bit the curiosities of the Roman, of the ancient world. I see there is a guy here who's probably an expert who supposed to be whatever. They run the channel, probably talking mostly about Rome, its architecture. Here I see the industrial complex. Again, it's mostly about that. The guy probably likes very much the Roman Empire, late antiquity. Things like, did size matter to the Romans? Rats, mosquitoes, and the fall of Rome. Why hasn't the Pantheon's dome collapsed? Right? I mean, we could easily find better topics, telling the truth. And also the video length is actually the worst aspect of this. 10 minutes, 8 minutes. I'm giving too much for granted. I'm really giving too much for granted here in terms of everything is fine until I don't watch the video. Probably most of these channels I listed are actually pretty bad channels too, from a strictly historical point of view. There is no doubt, right? But hey, people want to be fed with this stuff. They're well served. Epic history talks a bit more about military history in some detail. I see half an hour long videos, 54 minutes, 42 minutes, perhaps slightly more in depth and definitely successful channel, talking about battles, wars, campaigns. So it's mostly contemporary history, a lot of 20th century, also 19th century Napoleonic. There is some also ancient medieval, but mostly like late medieval, late modern warfare, contemporary warfare. Probably good. I don't know, I never really watched it. Middle Ages, this is called Middle Ages. This is Middle Ages music. They make basically contemporary music with medieval tones. Imperium Populorum, I don't know what this is. It doesn't have videos, but just this is trash. I can easily say this is really bad stuff. They just have shorts about ridiculous things that they don't even understand because it's all a clickbait. You don't even know what it is. There's this guy who looks with this appalled face. Oh my God, I have to tell you this. With a short format. It's terrifying. Historia Civilis. This was a famous. It explained battles, wars, etc. Probably not in the most hypergraphically advanced way. I see here shapes, like things I could have created with paint or whatever. Like, it's very simple. It talks about different wars, mostly about Rome, etc. I don't know about the historical information. Slightly longer videos than the average, 25 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, but it talks also about political systems as well. So it's something slightly more institution-oriented, lifestyle-oriented, but it's mostly political and military history. Call Me Ezekiel. This is I see a lot of counterable memes, so I presume it's, I don't know really. I see War Thunder clips on it. Some of it, yeah, it's not bad from a visual point of view, probably, but it's probably very worked content, very edited content, lots of counterpole stuff, especially. It's about warfare a little bit, whatever, I don't know. It's most of the same kind of the others, but perhaps not that better. Apostolic Majesty. Apostolic Majesty is somehow famous. I must say this. Surely he makes good content. He's a guy who goes reading articles, reading books before he makes the video about a specific topic. In my opinion, he's a bit too much a classic liberal while being a conservative or even a traditionalist, and the reason is that he has a definitely a British background of some sort. And in fact, the topics he comments on are mostly through that sort of British filter and lens and perception. He has, say, preference for certain topics rather than others. He's mostly into the talking about the defeated, talking about the decadent, the empires that were cancelled, the idea that there is this tradition was washed away, but it hardly ever talks about older stuff, right? It's mostly 19th century, early 20th century. He also talked, of course, about other things, Roman history, etc. But in general, it seems to me that he is predictably conservative regarding sort of, I would say, mainstream opinions, and especially in British conservatism towards, I don't know, the take on the French Revolution. It was all bad, or all. I don't want to simplify, because the guy, he's really knowledgeable. And sometimes I remember when Carlson made that interview to Putin, I wholly agreed with Apostolic Majesty with the ridiculous view that, of course, Putin has of history and the history of Russia and Ukraine, etc. And I, as you know, I made my share of videos about the actual history of Ukraine and why, in fact, the entire Muscovy narrative is of Russia that was invented in Chernihiv. It was basically the Ukrainians who created that for the Tsarists. Is all this actual story, and I remember Apostolic Majesty saying, here, you know, I am needed, because I don't know whether he specializes on the topic, I don't know, but let's say I am, like, he said something like, I'm one of the few people who can actually comment to this level of that, but I can also comment on that, but I would never say such a thing in terms of, like, I'm the one who knows how things really are. He has beefs with people on Twitter, he's politically into the fray in that sense. So I don't want to be an a-hole, especially towards a guy like him that really makes very interesting and good work. But I'm very continental European. He's very insular European, and there are certain things, certain approaches, maybe because he comes more from a contemporary modern history vision. I don't know. I come from more from a medieval one and sort of ancient, veteran, traditional one. I don't know. I wouldn't make the same, I wouldn't cover the same topics he covers, and especially I wouldn't deal with them in the same terms, right? And again, I don't want to say anything in particular against him. I'm just saying that some people said, oh, why don't you work with him? We're very different, right? I don't know if he ever acknowledged me or anything. He has a more successful channel than mine. I talk about similar things, but we're very different in many ways. Very similar on others, there is no doubt, even in thinking, in beliefs, but we're also different. And maybe that difference would be a plus, right? So I'm just saying my own thing, and at least the vibe that I receive. It may be wrong, but in general, I've heard more or less what it is. Just for saying that there are, as a traditionalist, I know that there is a specific way to traditionalism that I personally never found in conservative and also traditionalist, self-styled traditional content. And so that it's not just because one guy is intellectual and elaborate and competent, etc., that necessarily there is a full picture, and he has to agree with the other guy completely, because the people who listen to them do not even get to what he's saying or what other people are saying. Like, I know that lots of people follow us because of that position, but they do not actually get even what we're saying, which is a problem, honestly. Eastern Roman history, the guy, this makes, he made, he doesn't post that often anymore, but he has made apparently like some good content on Byzantine history. I know he's always been around. He has channel roughly of my size. I've been growing a bit more. The only channel perhaps I'm managing to surpass among all this. And I don't know, it's always the same length, however, 20 minutes, 7 minutes, 3 minutes even. So I don't know what this is about. I also disagree with the concept of Eastern Roman as an official name, but I was told that he does as well, so he's aware of that. I don't have any problem regarding it. Romabu ramblings. This stuff is probably very also 20 minutes. I don't know what he does. Ranking periods of Roman history. Should we use the Byzantine word? Similar topics to which I covered in some videos at least. Best fake quotes in memory. Okay. Did the ancient Romans believe in dragons? Scipio Africanus wasn't bad. Did Heraclius change the official language of the Roman Empire? These are interesting topics, maybe are also fairly well covered. I don't know, but I thought that this was like a meme-based video. I see video footage from different sides. I don't know. And I think this is super serious historical stuff. Majorianus. Honestly, I don't like this guy's content. I think it's too monothematic and too dialectically, rhetorically, actually. Everybody thinks this about how the Roman Empire went down. Haha, you thought that the end was in 476. Instead, but it doesn't necessarily say much more, right? Some topic maybe improved over time, but aside from the fact it's always, again, 15 minutes, 17 minutes, it's just about that idea. What was the fault of the Roman Empire fell? Basically making comparison between contemporary politics and late antique spirituality, which are too excessive. Like once he said that basically under Rome, state and church were separated. Oh my God, like this is heavy. If you say such things, like you may have. Again, I'm glad there is this channel, but we must understand that there is a specific historiographical, scholarly, academic knowledge that you can't simply go out there and bypass by especially trying to specialize in a topic like this that does require some specific training information, right? So saying some things may be really dangerous, because we know very well certain things about how they happen. They have been very well studied, and let's go by that. It's also a lot of AI art, and it's a bit too like who did destroy the Roman Empire? Let's blame him for him, kind of attitude. History March. This was about battles videos, like boxes clashing against one another. Probably good historical analysis, mostly the ones of battles. I don't know how deep he goes into the sources, but at least it's a slightly longer format than the 20 minutes. So probably if it focuses just on the battle, maybe it actually has some good, let's say, explanation. I'm not entirely sure because also the boxes are a bit too simplistic. It can't be schematic, of course, it must be schematic to an important degree, but I don't know, it's just battles anyway, so I don't know how much that intertwines with a broader knowledge of the art of war, so I'm not too thrilled in general. Shadiversity, do we even have to talk about him? He talked about the art of war sometimes, but he's not much into it. He LARPs, he does weird stuff. Like, he's probably a good guy. I admire him from his work. He's a very successful YouTuber. But again, I can't watch again. It just spends like, we threw this sword against this and see what happens. We use a contemporary pistol and a sword, like, and a katana. It's all about katanas, like, regardless of the fact that surely the guy is competent enough to wield weapons in some ways, at least. He had beefs with those kind of hysterical hemists who think that they literally know how to use weapons like they did in the past, and I side with Shadiversity. There was also controversy with his Schola Gladiatoria because of his conservatism. He has my sympathy in general, but I mean, with his reach, he could do much more historical content, and he simply decides not to do that because he needs the money at the end of the day. He also had problems regarding that, so in any case. Lath, this guy has some, I don't know, it's Europa Universalis kind of stuff. It's mostly looking at that. Lindebaj, oh my god, these are big channels. Lindebaj makes pretty scatter stuff. He talks also about songs, music. He, however, talks sometimes about military history. He began like that. He is very... he talks about moral controversy. He has a bit of a very superficial approach to HEMA. I think, he tends to be a bit too much technologistic, a bit too much oriented towards that. I simulated that, we see how it happens. I know how it happened. I know how this happened in combat, or at least he's a charming, protagonistic individual, and I understand it is character, but I'm not really fully convinced that this guy knows some things. He knows, right? He has studied enough about tank warfare, about ancient warfare, about platoon tactics during World War II. He knows some of it, but at the same time, he's very idealistic. There's that pinch of British bias that frankly is annoying to a certain extent, and in fact he doesn't even talk too much about the broader art of war. So yeah, again, I don't know what his specialty is, but I suppose there are some limits to what he says. But very interesting, successful channel. I used to watch him, and again, he's a cool guy. I advise him. Metatron, I talked a bit. I made some video commentary about him. He makes now shorter videos, probably for money. He sometimes tackled ethnic, historical issues. He's not bad overall as a historian. He says more or less what he has to say. However, he's a bit too involved into the ethnicistic and counter-ethnicistic debate on the internet, to the point that he also swung to extremes to make points, and I sort of he never answered me by reprimanded him in one of my videos. I like him. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with him, but he is, if I understand correctly, a linguist who definitely has a great passion also there for reenactment or for history in general, and he talks about certain stuff maybe without being fully aware of the story, and he uses terms like, now this is the truth, we will settle the matter once for all, this is the actual answer, and he maybe puts together three quotes and that's his way of saying the truth. Like, sorry, but in history we work in a much more thorough way. He has apparently a team of friends, scholars, historians that help him also against money, because he literally uses them for this service. But he's capable of researching his stuff, but not necessarily in having that deeper, comprehensive, critical capacity that nobody actually asks for on YouTube, and that only like like a butthurt person like me can resume sometimes hearing certain things that he claimed at times. But overall, he's a good guy. Again, I don't really dislike him. He does what he does. He's been successful. I have nothing against that. The Lost History channel, this is also probably, they really have to do them. It's all archaeology stuff, but at a level of always like the marvelous thing. Oh, did we discover this really or not? Like this kind of questions, right? I don't know how cool that is. Invicta mixes a bit of fantasy games and worlds with actual military history. Some of the content is good, is well done, but let's be honest, you can't go around saying I found an alternative view of how the Battle of Cannae went because I used a video game. He talks too much as if he was an actual expert on certain things, and I've heard him even criticizing. I don't know. He interviewed a guy who worked behind the movie Napoleon with all the Osprey evidence prepared to say, "Oh, look, it's wrong. This is not how they fought." And that guy said, we didn't make the movie like he acts a bit too much as, "Oh, look, here we have get how it really was like in combat in a battle. We reconstruct." I don't know how young the guy is, but it's too hyped for things that we actually study with much greater care and analysis than even the deepest ones that he usually he can provide. Like in that video of Khan, it is still based basically on a video game. It doesn't even take into consideration alternative arrays for the Romans that have been studied, have been covered. Too much referentiality to, again, the experts, the academia, without still being one and presenting in ways that I personally wouldn't present because they are too acritical and too really unresearched and without context for a proper military historical analysis. History hit documentaries, experts, etc. These are the guys who actually are reprimanded by Metatron as well, because they call these alleged experts and they give dumb answers for dumb people. That's why they make lots of views and they read Google questions and here's the mystery of the 5,000-year-old Stone Age site and whatever. It's really like the kind of possibly some of the worst stuff you can have, especially consider that the experts are not experts. Historia Militum, too much like a bit of a simplified vision of history. Now we explain to you how, look, maps did not exist. Rome's elite legionaries, the legion identity, or how did troops level up? But this shows you that the guy that passes from like a sickly, like weakling, that passes to all pumped up, like gladiatorial training, and 14 minutes long. How can it actually stick? Also with these thumbnails of the guy pumping up. How educational is it really? It's not like it's bad stuff, but people believe it's better than it is. All right, and this is a bit like the problem with Invicta as well. Guys, it's a lot about Rome, of course, as you can understand from the name, but it's never about some actual kind of art of war criticism, right? It's like 3 most impressive centurion careers. The funny Roman army. I don't know, maybe it's good content. I don't doubt, again, that it can be entertaining, whatever, but they pass too much from, people take it too much from passing from the joke to actual serious things in military historical terms, and that's mainly the problem. Look back history, I don't know what it is. A lot of world history, mostly nationally based. Here I see a bit of memes, lots of maps, I don't know. Overly sarcastic productions, 20 minutes videos or less, 9 minutes, whatever, 15. Was this the guy who talked always about Italy? The popes, it's a bit too many memes. This guy who wrote so much about Venice was very fixated about Venice. There's not just Venice in Italian history. Maybe a good video about the military history of Modena, for example. You will never find it on the internet. Too many sort of mixed with, here I see fantasy novels, video games or movies. I don't know what it is. There is some culture behind it, I don't doubt, but also the length, 10 minutes, it's off-putting. Roman wise guys, Miscellaneous meets Cadmus, the myth of Cadmus in 5 minutes. There's so much to draw from that stuff. Maybe kids will learn about that, but come on. History profiles. This is also the British-centered documentary style with AI and fixed images, anachronistic images about the past, dispatched for, this is how actually we should see history in the pop culture. Arminius, Charles V, the father of England, Styrbjörn, the exiled berserker, Alpha, Penda. It's always the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons. It's never like some, good late medieval king policy. It has to be always the Normans of the early days. It's nothing about the English civilization in later and never. It's like this world of history made meme. No Legia, 17 minutes, 10 minutes, 32, 27. Why is Ohio a state? Well, this is very paradox based. It's relatively simple in visuals, but it's probably schematic and good in that sense. But how did Rome become Christian in 12 minutes? Cannot at least even explain why. It's how, but then you should answer also to other questions. How did the Confederacy crumble in 22 minutes? I don't know, maybe it explains it well, I have no idea, but it's mostly contemporary history on maps and why did this thing happen. A random YouTube channel in this way. Let's talk religion. I don't know how good they tell the history of religion, probably not much, right? It's mostly like that sense of religion is all these various groups that we have to put a label on, typical sort of Anglo-American mentality of everything fits a box, that we allegedly are so superior that we can simply cover as a wall. Instead, religion is the search for something much bigger, tradition is much bigger, and I don't think that here tradition is dealt with comprehensively, but mostly with sort of you see here even Satanism, feminism. What is Satanism? Ghosts, creepy history of vampires. Come on, man. Like, even if you do good content in other terms, and I'm being generous for all these channels here, you can do better. Ludi and Historia. This is a guy who plays video games and in 2 minutes tells you, I will tell you actually how, this is the historical context we're talking about. Look at, wow, here they created this state that existed at the time. Wow, think about that. Okay, if you have fun and make money with that, I don't know if you can with video games. I don't know. Survive the Drive, we said it. Let's be honest, it's plain white supremacism. It would be easier said than masked. It's always the same point. It's hyper self-referentialistic, ethnocentristic obsession with one's own race. No other history dealt but the one winking at, say, look, the guys with blue eyes behave like that. We come from this, and look, they want to aggress our tribal identity and whatever. So it's not so dumb in the expression. He actually mocks the same people who run in the forest because that's where Odin is, etc. So, but at the end of the day, the pseudo serious way he addresses this topic is actually not serious at all, in my opinion. It's very narrowed down. It doesn't take into consideration the imperial Catholic tradition that these peoples believed in also before Christianity. And it's, again, just stopping to this northern intended as it's our business, we are special, nobody else can be part of the club. And let's not even talk about any other European people because they have no tradition or it's not ours, and so we are the best, but except you're being overrun by immigrants. So, okay, but this should not be exactly the reaction that fixes it. because there is a much more powerful reaction that can fix it, and this is just like a reduced way. And we know that the guy has contacts with actual neo-Nazis that he also, I think, called, he had engaged, say, open public connections with through the channel, etc. So it's a bit of a problem. This thing is terrible, vlogging through history. So this guy basically watches other videos, and that's his videos. So basically, you can watch other people's channels on his, and he stops every few seconds, says, yeah, let's like that. I remember once he was watching one, I think it was Kings and Generals video, because he got permission for that, right? Because otherwise there would be copyright issues as well. And I would never do that, because if they change idea, what did you have a contract or something, whatever? And he's the guy who said, oh yes, people in the Crusades, like it was the people at the top who wanted the war, but the people didn't want the war. No, it's always like, yeah, this guy's supposed to be a history teacher, all right? And so we have actual people following this, and for these non-opinions, if not for maybe a few things he knows better that I don't know of, but this is literally what the channel is, and there are lots of others like that, and I'm not even covering here. Here there is Todd's Workshop, which is basically a guy who tests replicas. He creates his own about especially longbows and crossbows. That's the obsession of the story. He also has trebuchets, etc. It's frankly, like I doubt of the validity of all this. Like, what do we actually are? I mean, if you have fun creating this stuff, good, but what do we actually get from these replicas specifically in a strictly historical terms as a piece of whatever, when what matters is collective tactics, moral forces? So who cares? You can't replicate a medieval army fighting on the field just because you create a longbow that is supposed to be similar to the one that probably is also very similar to the ones we found, say in the Mary Rose shipwreck, etc. But again, what are we supposed to do with this? And do we actually have a video footage of a battle to say what happened? Why don't we study history instead of making this deterministic, materialistic, incredible waste of time? And because they get lots of views as well. Everybody, wow, that's how it should have worked. Has any of these people actually reconstructed the Battle of Crécy from the actual availability of the actually available sources? And just known the enormous depth of the entire military historical criticism you can make of that. Who the fuck cares about how a crossbow performed? I mean, seriously. Schola Gladiatoria. Matt Easton, great respect for this man. Very much Hemaistic focused. He runs the channels beautifully. He is very much to the point. He's successful and whatever. He was the guy who invented Hema himself, single-hand. He has a fencing school, in fact, Schola Gladiatoria. He makes these videos. Only criticism, he stops to just how does this arm or armor work, right? There are sometimes very simple videos, also very brief, that 18, 20, 10 minutes. I used to watch him consistently many years ago. He knows his deal. I rely on him, but it's also like it stops there. Many people, again, the crowd behind this group says, oh my God, this is all what I need to know about medieval warfare, which doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of. Schola Gladiatoria is not about the art of war, it's not about tactics, it's not about strategy. It's not about many other anthropological aspects, religious, spiritual aspects of warfare. Matt Easton had apparently, again, a beef with Shadiversity, I think because the guy was against gay marriage or something. So I still respect Matt Easton for what he does, what it is, but say I don't think that he necessarily cares more than much about other things than, I don't know, like 16-minute videos saying you need this on your spears, right? Or 3 secrets about bayonets that are not actual secrets. Dog armor, deluxe saber. Again, he is also a historical weapons dealer. He makes he makes cooperation with other YouTubers, including the aforementioned guy that makes replica testing, archaeology. He's an archaeologist himself. He knows his deal, but again, he mostly covers well that aspect of arms and armor, and it's not like by watching this channel you understand essentially what medieval warfare was. I would stop it here, right? I would have liked to say more. Let me see how much time I have left, because in case I can add something more about what I just said for other channels, because in particular the last ones were very interesting and I had to run a bit because of the technical limits of my recording. We have here probably like we're towards the end. Okay, let's stop it here. I wanted just to be essentially about the speed of it, etc. Again, my impression in general is that on YouTube, to make the long story short, there is no art of war history whatsoever. Probably the closest thing that comes to that is Invicta, Historia, Saint Roman history. I haven't covered that. It's somehow very similar to something we've seen, and Kings and Generals. These are the channels that tend, maybe that other guy that makes only battles, we said before, with the boxes, etc. It's a bunch of channels that basically detain at least the widest amount of times and places coverage regarding military history and the art of war. But regarding the latter, you don't really have a deeper understanding of how actual armies really work. Kings and Generals very much relies, for example, on when he has to talk about medieval warfare in general, as they often do, they rely mostly on late medieval examples. They basically treat medieval warfare as if it was just the early 15th century France and England. So thinking that, for example, medieval armies were chronically small, missing because they rely on experts, but also on scholars, in fact, do not really study much else about military history across Europe. They probably don't know other European languages, and so it always ends up to some sort of more conventional Anglo-American disclosure topics of stuff we can't simply surpass. They never make videos about, I don't know, the Italian communes, or say the French armies during the 13th century in a more thorough fashion, the Spanish, whatever. It's always like that, example, and then the Hussites at the 15th century, and maybe something else about France and England in the late 12th, early 13th century. The main highlights of essentially Anglo-French warfare during the sort of most famous periods of clash, and that's it. Yes, they do cover a lot in other depth, but they don't, this is the point, they don't connect it to the wall. The art of war requires the diachronic and comparative studying of tactics, armies, technology evolutions. And in this sense, regardless of the fundamentally, basically correct information that they give, they do not make any of that. They don't even try. They want just to check the box, have I talked about this topic that people will click on. There is no comprehensive guidance to the art of war also as far as the rest of the eras is concerned. It's mostly good storytelling, again, more good information, good disclosuring in its own regard, but I don't think that you actually become particularly more knowledgeable about the art of war in its deeper meaning simply looking at this stuff. I really don't. Right? I've been pretty harsh, but I think I'm stern as fair. We will surely talk about this stuff because it's a video I needed to do in some ways, and I'm glad I did. I'm sure there's going to be criticism and probably could open actually to interesting opportunities, so we'll see. For today, however, I stop it here. I just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. As always, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.